Tasha stepped out of the sleek black car and adjusted her tailored blazer, taking in the familiar yet surreal sight of the hotel she had spent years dreaming about owning. The sunlight glinted off the polished glass facade, and the sign above the entrance proudly displayed the name she had chosen with so much care. Every detail of this place had been her vision, from the plush velvet chairs in the lobby to the hand-selected art lining the walls. She inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of freshly waxed floors and the faint hint of lavender from the lobby diffusers. It was all hers now, or at least, it should have been. As she walked toward the front desk, Tasha felt a thrill of pride mixed with a flicker of nerves. After so many years of late nights, financial battles, and endless negotiations, this moment was a culmination of everything she had worked for. She had meticulously overseen every renovation, personally interviewed and hired the staff, and even curated the menu for the rooftop restaurant. She had poured not just her money but her soul into this hotel, and now, seeing it in the morning sun, she could hardly believe it was finally real. Tasha approached the desk, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The lobby was quiet, a few early guests sipping coffee and scrolling on laptops, the soft hum of an espresso machine punctuating the calm atmosphere. She gave a friendly nod to a bellhop arranging luggage and to a guest at the far end of the lobby. Then she reached the front desk, expecting at most a polite greeting, maybe a smile. Instead, she was met with a stare so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. The young clerk behind the counter, barely out of college by the look of him, was eyeing her as if she had just walked out of a suspiciously cheap costume shop. His hand hovered over the phone, fingers tense, and there was a wariness in his eyes that immediately put Tasha on edge. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said slowly, as if choosing his words with extreme caution. "Can you explain why you're wandering around without checking in?" Tasha blinked. The words struck her like a thunderclap. She opened her mouth, unsure how to respond. The air in the lobby suddenly felt thick, oppressive, as if time itself had slowed. I own this hotel," she said carefully, trying to keep her voice calm and measured. The clerk cut her off, his eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, we have to follow protocol. Please step aside while we confirm." Tasha's heart sank a little, but not from fear. From disbelief. From incredulity. How could this be happening? She had meticulously handled every step of the acquisition, signed all the paperwork, and even had a team on site to ensure a smooth transition. Yet here she was, being treated like a trespasser in her own property. Before she could protest further, a middle-aged man in a pressed suit appeared at her side. He was the assistant manager, she realized, his expression a mixture of irritation and concern. He leaned in slightly, speaking to the clerk in a low voice that Tasha couldn't hear. The clerk glanced back at her, still suspicious but now slightly hesitant, as if receiving secret instructions he wasn't supposed to share. Tasha took a deep breath, trying to steady the rush of emotions. Anger prickled at the edges, but she knew she had to keep her composure. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. "I have all the documents right here," she said, sliding a folder onto the counter. The clerk's eyes flickered briefly toward the folder, but the suspicion in his gaze didn't waver. Around her, the lobby continued its quiet rhythm. A barista set down a cappuccino with a cheerful smile, oblivious to the tension at the front desk. Guests occasionally glanced up, some curious, some annoyed. At the disruption, Tasha noticed a little girl clutching her mother's hand, staring wide-eyed as if sensing that something unusual was unfolding. She felt a pang of empathy. No one should feel intimidated in a place that was supposed to be welcoming. The clerk cleared his throat, glancing again at the phone as if weighing whether to call someone. The assistant manager whispered a few more words, and then the clerk finally, hesitantly, extended a hand toward the folder. Tasha handed it over, watching his fingers brush the edge of the papers as he flipped through them, scanning the official documents and signatures. His eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned, but it was a slow realization, as if his brain refused to accept the truth immediately. For a moment, there was silence. Tasha's chest heaved, a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that her ownership was undeniable, frustration at the absurdity of being treated as a suspect in her own hotel. She met the clerk's gaze steadily, refusing to look away, and in that silent moment, she could feel the shift beginning, the subtle acknowledgement that yes, she belonged here, and no, she was not an intruder. The assistant manager finally spoke, his voice tinged with embarrassment. I apologize for the confusion, ma'am. We didn't realize. Tasha smiled, a little wry, a little triumphant. It's okay, she said gently, though inside she felt a surge of vindication. Now, let's get started on opening day preparations. We have work to do. The tension in the lobby slowly melted as the staff processed what had just happened. Guests returned to their routines, some casting curious glances, others oblivious. Tasha stood there, proud and steady, realizing that this strange, humiliating introduction to her own hotel would be a story she'd remember forever, one that proved even the most unexpected moments could be turned into triumph. Tasha felt her stomach tighten as the clerk hesitated, still staring at her as if he expected her to vanish into thin air. The assistant manager lingered nearby, glancing between Tasha and the documents in the clerk's hand, whispering again under his breath. The words were muffled, but the urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Tasha's jaw set. She had walked into this hotel with excitement and pride, and now she was being treated like an intruder, or worse, a criminal. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the absurdity of the situation. She had expected challenges when running a hotel, but not this. Sir, she said, her voice steady, firm but polite, I am the owner. I have the legal documents, the purchase agreement, and identification to prove it. I am here to oversee operations, meet the staff, and ensure that everything is ready for our first guests. She slid the folder across the counter again, making sure every paper was visible. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from intimidation, but from a surge of adrenaline. There was something strangely thrilling in this moment, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing she could either stumble or soar. The clerk's hands hovered over the folder, reluctant. He glanced toward the assistant manager, who shrugged with a sheepish expression. Tasha could feel the tension radiating from both men, the nervousness palpable, like a fragile bubble that could burst at any second. Behind them, the lobby seemed oblivious, the hum of the espresso machine and the quiet chatter of early guests continuing as if nothing were wrong. The contrast made the moment feel surreal. The clerk stammered, his voice faltering. We weren't expecting, anyone like you. His words trailed off. Tasha raised an eyebrow, her expression calm but piercing. Like me, she asked, emphasizing the words gently but sharply. Are you telling me that a black woman cannot own a hotel? The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the unspoken bias she had felt creeping beneath the surface. There was no anger, only quiet authority and clarity, the kind that made people think twice before speaking without considering their assumptions. The assistant manager shifted awkwardly, clearing his throat. It's not that, he said quickly, his words rushed, defensive. It's just protocol. We need to verify. I understand protocol, Tasha interrupted, her tone calm but unmistakably firm. But protocol should not be a weapon of doubt against me. I am here, fully documented, fully prepared, and fully entitled to be in this hotel. If verification is required, I suggest you call corporate or the legal department. You will find everything in order. The clerk swallowed hard and glanced nervously at the phone in his hand, as if unsure whether to dial or simply retreat. The assistant manager stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment, and cleared his throat again. Ma'am, we didn't realize. Please forgive the misunderstanding. His words were halting, awkward, but there was a glimmer of relief in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that he had been caught in the wrong. Tasha allowed herself a small, controlled smile, one that was more about quiet victory than malice. Thank you, she said. Now, let's focus on what really matters, making this hotel a welcoming place for our guests. She gestured toward the lobby, toward the little details she had painstakingly arranged, the fresh flowers on the reception counter, the hand-selected artwork, the soft jazz playing in the background. This was her domain, her creation, and she refused to let a moment of misjudgment overshadow it. As the clerk slowly handed back the folder, Tasha noticed the subtle change in his demeanor. The initial suspicion had faded, replaced by a tentative respect, tinged with embarrassment. Even the assistant manager straightened, no longer defensive but cautiously receptive. It was as if the room had shifted slightly, the air lightening with recognition and acknowledgement. A few guests glanced up, curious about the unfolding scene. One elderly man sipped his coffee, eyebrows raised, while a young woman with a laptop paused mid-sentence, noticing Tasha's composed authority. She realized that, for anyone watching, this moment must have seemed both tense and oddly theatrical, a private confrontation played out in public, with stakes invisible to anyone outside the bubble. Tasha exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. She had turned an embarrassing accusation into an opportunity to assert herself, to make it clear that she belonged here just as much as anyone else in the hotel. Her pulse was finally slowing, the initial surge of adrenaline fading into a steady, controlled rhythm. She glanced at the assistant manager and clerk again, meeting their eyes squarely. "I will be walking through the property shortly," she said. "I expect full cooperation, and I trust we can move forward without further confusion." The clerk nodded, his fingers tightening briefly around the counter as if holding on to a new reality, while the assistant manager offered a small, respectful bow of the head. The tension that had gripped the lobby for minutes now seemed to dissipate, leaving behind an undercurrent of respect and the quiet acknowledgement that Tasha was, indeed, the rightful owner. As she began to step away from the desk, Tasha felt a subtle thrill of triumph. This was her hotel, and she had faced doubt, disbelief, and bias head-on, and emerged unshaken. Every glance, every whisper of surprise, every awkward apology had only reinforced her place here. She was not just a visitor or a guest. She was the architect of this space, the custodian of its future, and the undeniable presence that would guide its success. Tasha stepped away from the front desk, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, and allowed herself a deep breath. The moment at the counter had been charged with tension, disbelief, and a touch of humiliation, but now, with the staff beginning to recognize her authority, a sense of calm determination replaced the initial storm of emotions. She glanced around the lobby, taking in the subtle details she had painstakingly chosen, the elegant lighting casting warm glows across the polished floor, the plush seating areas inviting guests to linger, and the delicate scent of lavender and citrus blending perfectly with the aroma of fresh coffee from the cafe corner. Every element told a story of her vision, her hard work, and her dedication. The assistant manager approached her again, his posture slightly stiff but his expression more composed than before. "Ma'am, if you'll allow me, I can give you a tour of the property. There are a few staff members who haven't met you yet, and I think it's important you see everything firsthand." His words carried a trace of humility, an acknowledgement of the earlier mistake. Tasha nodded, feeling the power of the moment, not just as an owner, but as a leader commanding respect. As they walked through the lobby, staff members began to notice her presence. A bellhop paused mid-step, his eyes widening, and a housekeeper lowered her cleaning cloth in startled recognition. Tasha smiled warmly at each of them, her demeanor calm but assertive, projecting the quiet authority of someone who had earned her place. The initial shock of her arrival had already spread through the hotel like a ripple in water, and she could sense the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Staff who had been nervous or skeptical were now curious, attentive, and even eager to engage. They moved toward the elevators, and Tasha observed the intricate details she had selected for every floor. Bespoke artwork highlighting local culture, soft carpeting that muted footsteps, and discreet signage that combined elegance with functionality. The assistant manager continued his explanations, pointing out operational areas, key systems, and the daily routines the staff followed. Tasha listened intently, asking precise questions that reflected not just her ownership but her genuine interest in the hotel's smooth functioning. She could tell the staff were now evaluating her, not as a suspect, not as an outsider, but as the person in charge. On the second floor, a small conference room awaited. It was designed to host meetings with business clients, local partners, and future event planners. Tasha ran her hand along the polished oak table, feeling the weight of possibility. This was more than a hotel, it was a canvas for growth, connection, and opportunity. She could imagine the rooms filled with laughter, negotiation, and celebration. Here, she thought, was where her vision would meet the world. The assistant manager hesitated briefly at the doorway, then spoke in a lower voice. "Ma'am, I think it's safe to say the staff are relieved to know you're the owner. There's some nervous energy, but it's dissipating quickly." Tasha turned to him, her expression calm but unwavering. "Good. They should be confident in their roles and in the hotel's direction. I want everyone to know that I am here to lead, but also to support them. No one should ever feel intimidated or undervalued in this place." As they continued the tour, a small group of staff gathered near the kitchen area, whispering among themselves. When they saw Tasha, their initial hesitation melted into smiles, tentative nods, and soft greetings. One young receptionist, braver than the others, stepped forward. "Congratulations, ma'am. We're excited to have you here," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Tasha's smile widened, a blend of gratitude and affirmation. "Thank you. That means a lot. I hope we can work together to make this hotel not just successful, but a place everyone is proud to be a part of." By the time they reached the rooftop restaurant, Tasha felt a sense of accomplishment settle over her like a warm cloak. The panoramic view of the city stretched before her, the early morning sunlight sparkling off the buildings and streets below. She imagined guests arriving here for cocktails at sunset, couples celebrating anniversaries, and business partners sealing deals over champagne. This space, like every corner of the hotel, was a testament to her perseverance and vision. Finally, the assistant manager turned to her, a hint of humility and respect in his voice. "Ma'am, I apologize again for the earlier confusion. I see now that I underestimated." He stopped, perhaps realizing that words weren't necessary. Tasha shook her head gently, a soft smile on her lips. "No apology necessary. What matters is that we move forward. This hotel is ours to make remarkable, and I trust you and your team to be part of that journey." The tension of the morning had completely dissolved. Staff who had been skeptical now watched her with admiration, curiosity, and renewed respect. Guests wandered through the lobby, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded, yet somehow benefiting from the newfound energy. Tasha felt a subtle thrill of triumph, not from vengeance or humiliation, but from the affirmation that she had faced doubt and bias with composure and authority, and had emerged stronger. Standing on the rooftop, with the city sprawling endlessly beneath her, Tasha realized that the morning's chaos was not a setback, it was a declaration. She was not just the owner, she was a leader, a visionary, and a force to be recognized. The hotel had witnessed her resilience, and now, so had everyone within it. The day ahead promised challenges, successes, and stories yet to unfold, but Tasha knew one thing with certainty: she belonged here, wholly, unapologetically, and triumphantly.